committee. I know that there are a number of people joining us on the screen. I'm in the presentation room in Neath, Talbot, Civic Centre in Talbot, with a number of officers. And you will all be aware, obviously, that this meeting will be recorded. Mobile phones are to be switched to silent, and please raise hands if there are any questions. We've got two colleagues from Audit Wales joining us online as well. And I will start by asking agenda item 2 if there are any declarations of interest. No declarations noted. If anything arises during the meeting, please make sure that Nadine is informed. The agenda item 3 is the minutes of the previous meeting. The minutes are there for accuracy. And at the end of any conversations, I will need a proposer and seconder to approve. Does anybody have any points they want to raise in respect of the minutes? Mark?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's just a general comment, which I think we've raised before, which is just to ensure that the minutes, whilst not necessarily meant to be a verbatim record of the conversations had, just do record some of the context and the detail, particularly when we are discussing some of the risk management and audit type points. So yeah, just one for noting for future minutes, please.
Thank you. I'm sure Democratic Services will take a note of that and action it as appropriate. Any other points anyone wants to raise in respect to the minutes? No? In which case, the next item is agenda item 4, the forward work programme, which starts at page 13. Oh, sorry, we need to have a proposer and seconder before I move on to that. So could somebody propose the minutes are a correct record or a true record?
Happy to propose, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Seconder, please. Somebody second.
I'm happy
to second. Thank you, Mark. So then we've got the forward work programme. This is for noting. Does anyone have any points they want to raise? Councillor Thomas?
I'm just going to say, Councillor Ollie Davis has tried to join the previous. There we are. All right, never mind. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And welcome, Councillor Davis. So the forward work programme, anyone have any comments? Andrew?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just on the forward work programme, I think in the minutes we just approved, it does talk about under section 7, which is on page 8. It does talk about Audit Wales highlighted things about an Office of the Governance and Audit Committee in future to talk about cyber security. I think that just needs to be added to the forward look going forward. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. That will be actioned by Democratic Services. Thank you, Andrew. Any other points anyone wants to raise? No? In which case, the 5th item is an Audit Wales document, No Time to Lose, starting on page 15. And Euros Lake, I believe you're going to introduce the report. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair. Board of Down members. This is a national report that we published back in April this year. It looks at how public bodies are fulfilling their responsibilities under the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. To give some background to the report, under the Act, the Auditor General has to carry out an examination at each public body at least once during a specific reporting period, assessing the extent to which they've acted in accordance with the Sustainable Development Principle when they set the wellbeing objectives and also take steps to meet those objectives. The reporting period to which this report relates to began in May 2020 and ended in May 2025. So the report is a summary of the work that we've undertaken over that 5-year period, and it draws on an extensive body of work on both wellbeing objectives and the steps that public bodies have taken to meet them. The key headlines from the report are 10 years since legislation, the Act has increased in prominence. We see the Act influenced in the longer term planning, decision making, and working practices across Wales. However, we do see examples of, I guess, little or no explicit consideration given to the Act and the Sustainable Development Principle. And there's still much to do in terms of corporate functions and embedding that way of thinking. There's a degree of variation in practice within organisations as well, and also within and between sectors. But ultimately, from where we are sitting, the Act is not driving the system-wide change that was intended initially. Now, clearly, implementing this type of change across large and complex organisations can be challenging, and that context is important, but it makes applying the Act more difficult, but it also makes longer term and preventative thinking more urgent, if anything. And as we look back at the reporting period and think ahead to the future, we have to ask, I guess, what action can be taken now to affect that direction of travel in the future. And that's why the report states that accelerating progress under the Act starts with prioritising prevention. Now, delivering change requires action from all public bodies individually, but individual action alone won't be enough. Public bodies do find themselves working in an environment that doesn't always promote that change and way of thinking, way of working, and in that respect, there's action that national government could take to create the conditions for more progress in that regard. And that's why ultimately that all 4 recommendations in this report are aimed at Welsh Government. The first is recommending that Welsh Government should clearly set out a scope and a timetable for its own post-legislative evaluation and any changes to the Act. The second recommendation talks about Welsh Government working together with public bodies to explore and agree what can be done reasonably to minimise funding uncertainties and support that medium and longer term planning where that's possible as well. We also recommend that Welsh Government should explore ways of encouraging investment in prevention and preventative ways of working. And lastly, we recommend that Welsh Government should work with public bodies to take a fresh look at the assessment of performance and the impact under the Act as well. I hope that gives you a quick flavour, committee, of the report and the key headlines and the recommendations as well. It's been tabled before the committee for information today. Neath Talbot Council is clearly a named body under the Act, but as I said, the recommendations are all for Welsh Government to take forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I thought it was a fascinating report, and one I'm sure that all local authorities and any other public bodies will need to pay close attention, because although the recommendations for the Welsh Government themselves, they do have implications for other bodies. Anybody have any questions they want to raise? No questions. Do any officers want to say anything in respect of this document?
Chair, if I could just add, just provide the committee with some assurance. Audit Wales undertook a piece of work here back in 2023. It was a piece of work that they did across a number of local authorities, looking at how local authorities set their wellbeing objectives, taking into consideration the SD principle. We had quite a positive report from Audit Wales, because the report said the council had applied the SD principle and had carried out extensive engagement when setting its wellbeing objectives. There was a recommendation in that report in terms of us needing to strengthen our arrangements in terms of monitoring our wellbeing objectives, which we've taken on board, and we now have our revised corporate performance management framework, which clearly sets out now how our wellbeing objectives, the corporate strategy, will be monitored going forward. So I just wanted to provide the committee with that assurance that that piece of work has been undertaken, and we haven't reset our wellbeing objectives since 2022.
Thank you. Any comments based on what the officers just said? No? In which case, obviously, welcome the clarification you've just added. Thank you, Karen.
Okay.
Right, so this report was for noting, so it's duly noted by the committee. We've then got agenda item 6, the closure of accounts, which run to just short of 100 pages. And this is for Hugh Jones, Director of Finance, to introduce.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. So as you say, this is these are the draft statement of accounts for the council for 2024-25. presented, handed over to Audit Wales on the 27th of May on time. So they're now currently subject to audit, and that's really it. Chair, happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I suspect we may have a number of questions on this particular item. So colleagues, over to you.
Silence.
Mike, thank you.
Thank you. So can I ask a couple of questions maybe to kick off? Just straightforward one first. I think it looks like just a simple presentation error to me. On page 78, the top paragraph, it says published audit statement of account should be completed by 31st of July 2024, but I'm presuming that should be 2025 and actually later.
Yes, I'd say so. Just checking. Sorry, bear with me.
It was only something when I read the papers I thought was
Page 78 to the pack of the accounts. Like,
yeah. I think it was page 78 of the.
Page 78, yeah, paragraph 1.
Is that the page 78 of the nearly 100 pages, Mike?
I think it's page 78 of the pack.
Yeah.
yes, it should be 31st of July 2025. Mike, sorry.
Yeah,
You are correct.
I was just genuinely trying to be helpful.
Yeah, thank you. That's fine.
And then I just wanted to understand process really, because we're seeing these as a draft and therefore information and review, but presumably they come back to us for more formal approval at some point in time.
Yeah, they'll come back hopefully September, October time once the audit's been complete. So you'll see the amended statement of accounts. If there are any amendments, you'll see a report from Audit Wales called an ISA 260 report that highlights what they found. And then, subject to committee approval, the chair will be asked to sign them off along with myself. And then they go to Audit Wales to be signed off then.
Okay.
And that meeting is an important meeting because obviously we need to guarantee that we're quorate, because we cannot have a situation where those papers are not signed off in time. But Democratic Services will make sure that everyone's been notified of that date in ample time. Any other points, Mike?
Well, just on the piggybacking on that as well, just could we confirm that that gets added to the forward work programme, because I couldn't see it listed as an item there, so I'm sure it won't be missed, but it would just be useful to include it on that. Can I just ask 2 other points and then I'll hand over to Andrew's waiting. So on page 89 of the pack, we talk about revaluation of assets, and there's quite a large revaluation gain, £78 million there. I couldn't really elicit from reading these what was driving the. So I get the revaluation process, but what particular assets or asset base was driving the increase in value? I don't know if there's anything you can add to my understanding at this point in time.
Yeah, bear with me, Mike. So I think it's to do with the fact that assets are valued over a 5-year period on a replacement cost basis. So in terms of schools, there's a significant increase over the last 5 years in terms of the cost to actually replace schools because of construction inflation, etc., etc. So that's the main part of the £78 million.
So it's mostly replacement of school buildings is the main driver behind that. Okay.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So the cost of replacing schools has gone up significantly over 5 years.
Helpful. Okay. And let me ask my final question. Page 128. So we're into the notes to the accounts here. We're into, I don't know where I'm actually, but page 128, notes to the accounts. I was just looking at the value of debtors increasing year on year. So we got long-term debtors jumps up, and even debtors sort of intergovernment stuff, central government bodies, other local authorities. It's just, again, can you add anything? What's the driver behind that? Is there any sort of fundamental concern for us to be aware of?
it's predominantly around the timing of cash receipts, Mike. So, whereas one year somebody might have paid us before the 31st of March, the following year we received the cash after the 31st of March. So there's £10.5 million of the capital grants that we hadn't received by the end of March. So obviously we had to accrue for those. £3.5 million of the VAT reimbursement, £7.6 million of the education grants. We were owed £10.7 million from Swansea for Shared Prosperity Fund, and £9 million in relation to an environment transport grant. So it's literally around the timing of cash flows, and those grants have been received post 31st of March. So those debtors have been wiped out.
Okay, so it's timing issue can be quite dynamic and fluctuate year to year based on the
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry, can I tell a small lie and ask one more question then?
Yes, certainly, Mike.
Page 38 is the officer remuneration section. Just really wanted to understand why certain officers were named directly and others weren't. Is there, is that elective, is disclosure optional for individuals?
There's a code of practice requirement to actually name officers whose remuneration package is in excess of £150,000, whereas below 150 you just have to name the post. So that's the reason why some are named and some aren't.
Right,
Thank
so it's
you.
150 is a total package there. Okay.
Yeah.
Does that answer all your questions, Mike?
Well, while we're on that table, can I just clarify the point? I could see the salary fees and total package for Director of Strategy and Corporate Services jumps significantly year on year. In the note talks about an appointment to that post being made in June. Is that the underlying reason for the jump, that there was a vacant post for part of the previous year?
Yeah, it was a newly created post, and Nolwenn was sitting alongside me, started in June 23, I think. So you've got 9 months costs in 1 year, a full year effect in
and a full year in the next. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. That was helpful to help me understand this.
Thank you, Mike. Andrew?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think I was just going to kick off really by saying this is a really good set of accounts. So just a thank you to all concerned with the preparation of the accounts. I had 3 quick questions. I'm not sure they're as hard as Mike's, but bear with me. So looking at page 90 of the pack, and it's section 10, it talks about the impact of the current economic climate on the council. And there's a paragraph in there which talks about the council being engaged in a range of significant economic development opportunities. It particularly draws out Tartar, which is obviously quite hot in the press, and it refers to it challenging to resource. So I suppose just a suggestion really, if we could add a little bit more narrative there perhaps to talk about, is that challenging to financial resources or human resources? It just feels like we could probably add a little bit more narrative to that. So welcome any thoughts on that, please.
So first of all, in terms of your thanks for the accounts, obviously I can take no credit for that whatsoever. So it's my colleagues here and others who deserve all the credit for that. In terms of the resource, that's a reference really to the internal capacity required around delivering again. Sorry, somebody's just walked in the sorry. The target references around the capacity around in-house resourcing of administration of the grant schemes and things like that, which we're dealing with. So I'm happy to add some more words around that for the final version, if that would be helpful.
Yeah, I think so, because it's attached to the accounts, it sort of could imply to the public that the local authorities put in vast sums of financial resource. So I think, yeah, as you say, it's to do with human resources facilitating grants. I think that would help. So thank you for that, Hugh. My second one was on page 99, and it's the cash flow statement. I hate cash flow statements, I have to be honest, but there's a little an asterisk there which talks about cash flows for operating activities includes the following items. I suppose I'm trying to get my head around why that isn't a separate note. And I couldn't actually work out how those figures related to the box above, apart from it's part of probably a number of other streams which all form part of the, I suppose, the 19731 was disclosed for last year and the 7553 for this year. So I don't know, Hugh, if you can add anything to that for me.
I'm afraid I can't add into that. I'll have to come back to you outside of the meeting because, like you, cash flow statements are a mystery to me. So on the face of it, but I can obviously come back. I got colleagues who'll be able to give you some more reconciliation on those. So come back and obviously circulate to all members as well, if that's okay.
Yeah, no, that's fine. At first glance, it just seems cleaner just to put it in a note, and it doesn't sort of distract too much from the statement. And my third comment then was on page 139. It's not a question, it's just an observation. I suppose for assurance, we've got the complete story. So on 139, it discloses the number of, I suppose, more high paid officers, and it shows how it's gone from 204 to 249. There is a little bit of narrative there that talks about that's because of sort of the pay remit coming in, and obviously then people do move up the bands. But I suppose we are now moving from 204 staff being in that disclosure to 249, which is quite a considerable jump. So I suppose I'm just looking for assurance that that is only to do with the pay remit, and obviously we've got a large pool of staff that are probably just outside of it and now crept in. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and the reason is predominantly to do with teachers moving into those bands, so increasing the numbers, so they're coming within the thresholds. But if you, again, we can add some more narrative around that when we prepare the final version if it's not clear to readers.
Yeah, I mean, I think the line there is helpful, but it's obviously going to attract attention. So I think the more narrative we give there, the better.
Great, we'll take that on board for the final version. Thank you. I got colleagues here making notes. We won't be losing these points. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Any other points anyone wants to raise, colleagues? In which case, obviously this document is here. Yes,
Chair.
Mike.
Can I ask one final question, and I will stop there.
Certainly.
Page 44, 144 of the pack, page 62 of the accounts. It talks to you about a decision taken by Cabinet to extend the contract with Celtic Leisure for a further 5 years. I just want to understand, was that as a result of a competitive procurement, or was it a direct award decision taken by the authority?
There was as you says there, a report to Cabinet back on the 2nd of October, which had 3 options in it. One was to continue with the process of bringing Celtic Leisure back in-house, which was a decision taken previously. The second option was around extending the Celtic contract for 5 years, and there was a third option around extending the contract with some changes. So members took the view that they would extend Celtic's contract for 5 years, which is the last possible extension to the contract. So and within the next 5 years, we'll then be taking a procurement process around that arrangement.
Thank you.
There we are. Thank you very much indeed. I've got one point that I wanted to raise before we move on. Council tax is referred to on a number of occasions in the closure accounts document. Hugh, could you highlight where the debtors, those owing council tax, where the liabilities actually sits within the
so they're on page 46 of the statement of accounts, so that's page 128 of the reports pack. So it's a section there specifically on local taxpayers' debt.
There we are. Brilliant.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. In which case this document is here for information, and therefore we note the report and move on to the next item, which is the corporate risk management arrangement, starting at page 173. You know when, I believe, that's your paper.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so as agreed, we bring this forward to you on another 6-monthly basis. I've mentioned on previous occasions the improvements being made in terms of how we present the strategic risk register. That's following feedback from yourselves and from members in council as well. I think we accept that there is more work to do in terms of embedding the way we approach the strategic risk register, and we've last week were in receipt of a draft Audit Wales report as well, which we are currently looking at and taking on board that feedback. So that will come in due course to yourselves as a Governance and Audit Committee once we've addressed the recommendations and prepared our organisational response form. I think the cover sheet articulates the changes that have been made to the strategic risk register since we last brought it to yourselves. There has been quite a bit of change. I think that demonstrates the level of detail taken at SLT meetings, and there's the discussion and the discussions with our cabinet colleagues as well at CMD. But we're happy you as officers take any questions yourselves may have, Chair.
Thank you. I note on page 173 that 4 additional categories have been added: environmental, health and safety, political and safeguarding. Obviously they're embedded in the paperwork, but it's good to see each of those added, particularly obviously safeguarding. It's something that's vitally important for all of us.
Yeah, like you said, Chair, we're trying to continually strengthen our approach in this area. So adding those 4 categories in around our risk appetite was very important for us to be doing.
Thank you. Colleagues, do you have any questions? I suspect you might. Mike, oh, sorry, Councillor Thomas.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so I've noticed that, the risks seem to be increasing and getting further away from their targets over time, and there is quite a gap between where they're at and where the target is, and I'm wondering what we're doing to mitigate that, and if it's working, if those targets are in fact getting closer to reality.
Thank you very much, Councillor Thomas, for your question. I think, like I said, introducing that target score is something relatively new to the organisation. Actually introducing a score against our inherent and residual risk is relatively new in the last 12 months. And I think what we've asked directors to go away and do is to look at what further mitigation actions they now need to be putting in place in order to reduce that residual risk down to be closer to the target risk that they've set. So that is an ongoing piece of work that is being undertaken, and directors will be challenged with regards to the impact therefore of those mitigation actions are having on the risks themselves. I think it's important to note that there is still need to kind of improve understanding of that approach. And I think some of that comes through in the Audit Wales report we've recently received as well. But our intention is, Councillor Thomas, that if we've identified a particular target risk score, then we've obviously intend to try and put mitigation actions in place to get as close to that as possible. But that'll be part of the ongoing work we do to monitor that journey, if you like.
Thank you. Is there training planned or taking place to allow people to get to what we've just?
I think we've identified that there's a need to give very specific officer training. We've obviously had these discussions at a strategic leadership team.
Yeah.
I think we've got a session in the diary tomorrow, which is taking a holistic view of 24-25 performance, of which the strategic risk register is an important element of that. And I think what we've come to the conclusion of is that we will need to provide that ourselves in terms of the training, because we've had a look at external providers. I think you've experienced an external provider which didn't quite hit the mark, it's probably fair to say. So I think
I'm still scarred as a result.
So I think a lesson learned there was sometimes delivering that ourselves might be the better approach. That's what we're looking to pencil into diaries now moving forward as well for officers.
Thank you. Mike, you've got your hand up next.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. I noted there was a couple of the strategic risks where there was no target risk expressed. So, for example, your SR05 on page 185, SR21 on 202. Could you just explain why there's no target risk expressed for those?
Yeah. Thank you, Mike, for the question. As Norbert just mentioned, this introduction of the target scores is relatively new, and it's something I think some areas are still working on. So I think it is a work in progress.
Okay.
And it is about sort of constantly reviewing the risks and as Norbert said, the mitigating actions to be able to lower that that, and I think it is just something that we're going to have to keep on at officers when they're reviewing to make sure that they are completing that target risk. I think some of them might be a bit uncertain of where they want to get that risk to a tolerance level of.
Okay, I get that, thank you. And can I ask, on page 200, SR18, it just sort of stood out for me that you got this concept of multiple owners of a single risk, and I didn't feel, I personally didn't think that was a best approach to things. So just a question, are you comfortable with that concept of multiple owners? Why should this one need 3 separate owners for that strategic risk?
I think that, again, this is a transition process. Obviously, Karen Jones, the previous chief exec, was the risk owner, and Francis coming in. We've put her name against it as the chief executive, but also both Nicola and Andrew Thomas's directorates span a lot of that work that they're undertaking. So I think Nicola's directorate from a business point of view, they're dealing with supply chains, and then Andrew Thomas sits on the transition board and is responsible for the employability and skills element. So neither sit in one directorate, but to have a clear owner.
Do you think that's
Again,
likely to
it's something we
continue
need
with?
to reflect on.
Yeah. Okay, that was going to be a question. Just, would you think you continue with that, or would you your intention to drive towards single owner for sort of that clearer accountability?
Our intention is to have a single owner, but I think it's just those internal conversations that need to be confirming which director is the owner of that risk, and I think that's something that we're going to be looking at the next time this goes to SLP.
Okay.
Just to add on the context around that, Mike, as well. I mean, we've had quite a bit of discussion around this, as whether we actually own it, if that makes any sense to you. So there's quite a lot of discussion happening at the moment around this particular risk, because clearly there's, it's heavily led by the UK government, clearly, in terms of the transition board, etc., that's been put in place. Like I said, we said the previous year exec felt it was needed to put it in here, but there has been quite some discussion as to where it actually belongs with us as a risk that we should hold, or is it a risk that we should transfer? And I think that conversation is still underway to a certain extent. And we've also discussed something that we need to look at is that kind of more community-based risk register, because if you look at the work that we're doing with the Public Service Board, for example, there will be risks that maybe we need to hold collectively as a region. So, or as a Public Service Board, we don't currently have that kind of risk register in place. I know that's something that's been alluded to maybe by Audit Wales, but it's certainly something we need to consider, because we need to decide whether we hold that risk 100%, or whether it's a risk that we share with partners in the Public Service Board area as well. So again, I think that's part of some of the mature conversations we're having in this space at the moment.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is it something, the word risk is confusing conversation, because risk, obviously you need to have risk registers, but then you have registers that record circumstances, don't you?
Yeah.
And the word risk is the one that's potentially driving
different mindset. Yeah.
That's all right. Any other points that Mike, you wanted to make on that, or are you happy with that?
No, thank you. Happy to pass to Mark.
There we are. Mark, thank you.
Okay, thanks. I think the first comment is just a kind of accuracy reflection in the graph on page 175, where I think the grey and the orange lines of the trend are probably on the wrong points on SR26, because when you then contrast that with the information on the following page, SR26 has currently got a residual risk score of 9. So again, just important to check, because I tend to look at the graphs quite a lot. I prefer the visuals rather than the massive tables of numbers, to be honest with you. But just a note. So unless I'm reading that incorrectly, yeah, by all means shout. Another one, just again for noting, on page 189, I just noted that for SR08, there are a number of comments which are suggesting the agreement's not reached. We're going to revisit 9th of April or pick up at the next meeting. Just looking at we know July, so appreciate some of these things are timing matter in terms of getting updates and papers to a place for us. But again, just thinking up, 3 or 4 months past that point when the last update's in the record on the risk, it kind of feels a bit long to me. It's a bit of a lag there. So again, welcome any comments on your process around that.
Shall we pause there and let officers answer those 2 points?
Absolutely.
Mark. So the first one was the SR26 currently standing at 9.
Yeah, so I think that's the typo, Chair, so noted, and I'll amend that for next time.
Thank you.
I think in terms of the comments, the strategic risk register was opened cabinet as well. So in preparation, we took to cabinet in June. So obviously it goes through a process of the updates being ready for strategic leadership team, and then cabinet members briefing, and then it went to June, to cabinet on the 25th of June. So we've had our papers ready since the beginning of June for this. So it's a sort of snapshot in time rather than being able to press the button and sort of send it across to you as up to date as it could be.
Maybe that needs to be recorded in the introduction to the papers, so we understand the timing process.
Happy to take that comment on board, Chair. It's a fair question. Those papers that are referred to there, the civil preferences, emergency preference policies, etc. They were all taken through decision by cabinet in June. But it's a fair point. We could have maybe made reference to that in the cover sheet. So there has been a time lag there.
Yeah, thank you. Any other?
Okay, yes, thanks, Chair. So I'm trying to understand my own writing here, which is proving difficult. I'm trying to tally off against other people's points, right? So bear with me. In no particular order in terms of page numbering, but if I go back to, I think it's page 175, bear with me. It's 176. So in the detail there, where we summarise the strategic risks, I mean, a couple sort of stand out to me. I'll just call a few out. So if we look at SR09 at the bottom of the page, in terms of personally identifiable information, obviously GDPR, risk exposure, you've got a gross inherent risk score of 12, which to me is quite low in this space, bearing in mind the amount of risk I'd see you carrying here if we were breached from a threat actor, cybersecurity, could be whatever, inadvertent disclosure. So similarly, SR12, which is just over the page, which is to do with your cyber security posture, it's only scored at 15. Again, I probably feel that's a bit low if you think about the raw risk here before you apply any controls. And if you kind of read across on that one as an example, and it's going to be a separate question of mine, we've got a residual risk score of 5. Now, I'm not aware of many organisations that have got the kind of target risk and residual risk aligned to a 5, because what you're saying is you've got a likelihood of a cyber incident crystallising on us of 1 and an impact of 5. But I mean, you've got to spend an absolute fortune of money to get your likelihood on a cyber security threat, in my experience, down to 1. So I think just to cap off those 2 points, and probably touches back to some of what previous speakers have said there, I think it's important that we kind of hold ourselves true on these risk scores, because there's a number of issues you start tying yourself up in here where your inherent risk and your residual risk scores are too closely together in proximity. You might start reading across and say, well, the action we're taking to mitigate the risks isn't working, but in reality, you've got other risk scores there, inherent risk, which are, you know, not too far above the residual risk. So I think for me, just a general point, you know, if you're looking at eight of the risks have got residual risk scores of red, that might be fair. You know, you may feel at the moment we can't take any further action to get those down. But I think when you start thinking about the gross risk, we've got a couple of them on there, 25, which is at the max. I think a number of these probably should be higher, because you've got to look at it from a, you know, what's the risk exposure to us if we don't have a solid control environment? We don't apply any control. So I think by definition, those would need to go up a little bit. I think I got one other question. I'm just checking I haven't covered it off. I think it's on page 205 to do with SR 25 and climate change, economic growth. I've got the right one. I can see that we've increased inherent risk from 9 to 25 and residual risk from 3 to 16, which are quite significant shifts. But I can't see any narrative on that record that tells me why we've done that, other than the fact we probably misscored it. But if it's off the basis of some other information, and maybe in the owner's comment, there could be or the other notes section at the bottom, a little bit of direction as to why we're making such changes to the risk scores, just to help us from a governance perspective in the meeting. And that's it, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark, for your observations and the question. I'll certainly note the ones you mentioned on security and cyber as an area maybe we need to kind of review again. I think we are constantly having these discussions, but it's, you know, the fair observations you're making with regards to, you know, if we were to be the subject of a cyber attack, the chances are that it would be quite have a massive impact on the organisation if we were to fall foul of a cyber attack. So I take your observations on board. In regards to the climate change one, that's you know, back to the conversation I began with the work that's being undertaken around these kind of setting of the scores. I think that's just a resetting, a more accurate resetting of the scores, if I'm honest. So maybe they were set too low initially, and they've had the conversation and decided to kind of reset, having had that discussion. But also, you know, impacting on that clearly is the whole cost of delivering a number of climate change initiatives around decarb, etc. It's becoming very clear on a kind of a national level that, you know, the budgets don't simply allow us to progress some of those big ticket items around the project. So I guess that's fed into the deliberations on that one. But certainly take away your comments on SRO 9 and 12 and safeguarding one in particular as well, Mark. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Andrew, you've got your hand raised.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I suppose it's just two observations, really. I think on reflection from where risk management's come 12 months ago, this is certainly moving in a positive direction, so I think that's good. The second observation is I do like the dashboard, but there's this column there that talks about the residual score movement since November 24. And there's a number of risks there that just hasn't moved since November 24. So I suppose that leads us to the question, are the mitigating actions appropriate and are they working? Or is it just that they are working, but the score or the risk keeps going up at the same time, which means we've got a net effect of no real movement in the score? Does that make sense?
Absolutely, and it's the right question to ask. It's a question we're asking of the directorates as well. You know, there was an observation that we made quite a while back now. We seem to have a number of mitigation actions that have been there for a while and closed down. Yet again, the score hadn't changed. So your question is quite rightly then were they the right mitigation actions, or is there anything more that we should be doing in that space? So again, it's back to that understanding of officers around how they need to address some of this work around the strategic risk register. So, you know, it has been a steep learning curve for them to get to where we are, but there's more work to be done, Andrew, and I think that's the kind of question that we do ask and challenge officers on.
Thank you. Certainly, my reading this paper, it's so much easier to understand and to pick key bits out of. So the progress has been huge. So congratulations to everybody involved. But I know in the past we've actually offered as a committee to act as a critical friend. Obviously not doing your job for you or doing anything other than as acting as a sounding board. And I'm fairly sure that, a number of us would be happy to, if you wanted us to fulfil that role, we would do so.
Thank you, Chair. And it's fair to say that the comments made by this committee over the last 12 to 18 months have influenced the way we've gone about this piece of work, as well, from the presentation of it to the work that we're undertaking now. I'm sure once we land the Audit Wales report during the autumn, there'll be further work for us to undertake, strengthen how we embed this into the wider conversations we need to be having around our corporate strategy and performance.
I did note on page 182, there's a reference to something that James Davis holds, which is the asset management of non-highway civil engineering infrastructure. It's down as ongoing, but the wording in the right-hand side column ends abruptly because it says right of way network for which funding. And obviously the box is too small, something is missing from that. So maybe we could have that confirmed and sent up to the committee. And also, I wasn't positive that I understood the difference between in progress and ongoing. Both, in my mind, other than the fact they've both got hyphens in the middle of them, seem almost the same. So can somebody explain what the difference is?
Yeah, I'm happy to explain, Chair. So when we were reviewing some of the mitigating actions, it was clear that they are going to be constantly ongoing. It's just a sort of natural flow that they will be ongoing. So the ones that are ongoing is something that will just continue to happen, so they're not going to close. Right. Whereas the in progress are ones that there is an end date on. And when we bring the strategic risk register to you in the next 6 months, we've progressed again, and we've got we're introducing a date that when we expect those mitigating actions to be completed by. So a completion date will be introduced, so we know when things should be done by. So then again, it's sort of ensuring officers are religiously reviewing the content of the mitigating actions rather than observance to it.
Maybe it's something that there needs to be a bit more narrative in itself to explain it, because that point, I mean, 2 years' time, not particular comments, but because they do seem very
definitely not.
Thank you very much indeed. Any other points anyone has to make? If not, this document is for information, and therefore we go to the report. The next item, which is item 8, is the Draft Governance and Audit Committee Annual Report 24-25. It's a document that I'm introducing as it is a report from this committee. Just for confirmation, this document obviously will need to be signed off today. So it will no longer be a draft document, and the finalised paper will be taken by myself and the interim audit manager to the council meeting for full council on the 17th of September. So does anyone have any points? It sets the scene about the work that we've undertaken. Steph, I don't know if you want to add something, as obviously you've been here for certainly quite a period that this report covers.
Just to say, factual report, so all the content in there is factual. It's based on the hard work of the committee in the year and appropriately reflected. And what we have done for this year's annual report, you'll see the format has changed slightly. There's some additional content in there. When this report was prepped, we went through the relevant codes and guidance to ensure that we did cover every required area, and that was delivered with Joe.
Thank you very much indeed. And obviously one of the things which we will ensure, or officers will ensure happens in the near future, is that training has to be undertaken for this committee. So may I have a proposer and a seconder, unless anyone has any other comments? Proposer, please. Thank you, Mike. Seconder.
Happy to second.
Thank you very much, Andrew. So that document now will be prepared by Democratic Services with a different or an additional frontispiece, and will go to the September meeting. Number 9, item 9, is the Internal Audit Annual Report for 2024-2025, and this is Steph's paper.
Thank you, Chair. The Internal Audit Annual Report has been drafted to ensure compliance with the Public Sector Internal Audit Standards. So you'll see quite a lot of information in there, but ultimately you'll have the Audit Manager's annual opinion over the overall adequacy and effectiveness of the Council's control environment. You'll have information in there on the internal audit activity completed in year, the performance of the service, and we also have to confirm our compliance with the Public Sector Internal Audit Standards and any results from our Quality Assurance Improvement Programme. So there's quite a lot wrapped up into that one report. This report is the last one where you'll see mention of Public Sector Internal Audit Standards compliance. So 24 to 25, it wraps that year up, because we've got the new global internal audit standards in the UK public sector that have become applicable from April 25. Whilst committee will have seen change the internal audit plan through the year based on appropriate rationale, the completed internal audit, counter fraud and investigation activity has provided appropriate coverage across the Council Directorate breadth, and that's enabled an unqualified, reasonable assurance annual assessment, and this is in line with the prior year opinion also. One item that I would like to highlight to committee is the Quality Assurance and Improvement Programme that we have, and that's within the appendices at the back. We have got the assessment of the 24-25 activity against public sector internal audit standards, and the results are there in the QOP. But what you do have in there is the actions needed for the actions needed for 25-26, and those action themes are aligned to our audit strategic objectives for 25-26. So you'll have already seen in the last committee through our audit strategy. So that improvement programme, there's a lot in there, but we've already made progress against a number of those actions, and committee should expect to see the results of that come through in year. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any questions anyone would like to raise? Mike first, please.
Okay, just a couple of questions for the audit manager. So I think for me, so I like the report, so just to put that up front, but just in terms of other things to question about, I think what would have been helpful for me if the audit opinion expressed also included some context around direction of travel, comparison year on year. And I guess a related question for me is, it's a reasonable assurance, but how strong a reasonable assurance is it? Because that scale in itself, is it good, bad, or indifferent? If you look at the individual engagement opinions on page 231, I guess the overwhelming majority are in a positive opinion section rather than an adverse opinion. So I would suggest there's sort of a pressure on your overall opinion. So thoughts on that?
Thank you for those. If I take the first point, so appreciate that feedback around reduction of travel, and I will make sure that's captured in future annual reports. The opinion last year was reasonable assurance as well, so it's a consistent outcome from the annual audit opinion, but brilliant feedback, thank you. In regard to where we are against in that range of opinions that can be given, I've been in post since September, and I'm basing that opinion on the internal audit activity completed, including counter fraud investigation work, the breadth of that activity and the outcomes for the year, and also wider assurance that we've got coming through, with the factor that internal audit and assurance opinions can never be absolute. So my opinion is that within that reasonable level of assurance, we're in the middle at the moment. But what I will do is for future reports definitely reflect that direction of travel and how that links to the individual activity outcomes for the year. Thank you.
Thank you. Andrew, if you could bear with me, can I ask one other question then? What I really liked in other annual opinion reports that I've read is when people are able to sort of include some thematics of findings from the work they've completed. And I think it helps the report almost become a lesson learned document or a self-help for officers within the council. So thoughts on that? Any possibility of reporting to include thematics in future years?
Definitely, and thank you for that feedback. The wider factor that I do note, so this report has been drafted to ensure compliance with SIAS. So they're the old standards now. We're moving toward, well, we're working against the new standards now, and even those new standards will require us to put additional information within that annual report in the opinion. So you should expect to see thematic information coming through for 25-26 onwards.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Andrew?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just a quick comment, really. Again, really helpful set of papers, thought really good. On section 2 of your report, Steph, it does talk about reasonable level of assurance, and you've got that box which is published in the sort of wider set of accounts, really. I suppose it's helpful to disclose what assurance level we got last year, but then also right at the bottom, just a comment to say that, you know, that the authority is taking the appropriate actions as a result of the work that has been conducted, because otherwise it just sort of finishes talking about we have found some issues, non-compliance, etc., that require action. It doesn't actually say that action is going to be taken, if that makes sense.
Thanks for that feedback, Andrew. What I'll do, because that information is within the wider detail within the report, I will ensure that an additional sentence is added to that opinion narrative and then taken through into the draft annual governance statement. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Obviously, this report was for information. Any other points? If not, we will note the report. In which case, we note the report. And item 10 is the review of decision-making structures and scrutiny, starting at page 249. And Stacey, I believe you're going to be introducing this. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, morning, members. And for those of you who don't know me, my name's Stacey Curran and I'm the Democratic Services Manager. I'm not sure I've seen some of you before, so nice to see you. And I'm just closing the loop here, really, Chair, because we had a review of our scrutiny arrangements back in January 2024. And the recommendations is obviously that the findings come back to Governance and Audit Committee for your constant observation of our review of our scrutiny and governance arrangements, for you to ensure you're discharging your role there, ensuring that the governance arrangements of the council are fit for purpose. So what you've got in your pack here are the arrangements that went through to the annual general meeting of council back in May this year, to really solidify our new governance and scrutiny arrangements regarding the democratic arrangements of the council. So in your report pack there, you've got all the revised arrangements that went to the AGM in May. Just the headlines then, we had a review of our scrutiny arrangements back last year, and this was our response to the findings which brought to your Chair back last year as well. So it's just closing the loop, reminding members of what our obligations are. So the headlines of the changes that have been put in place are that we have increased the time limit for publication for a 5 working day publication of committee papers. So instead of the 3 working days, members now have 5 working days where they receive the papers, hopefully to aid helping in preparation for the meetings. We've obviously had to push that through to officers to bring the reports back earlier. So we're hoping that that will aid members of committees in discharging their responsibilities as a committee member. We were finding that members were feedback that they didn't have enough time to read reports. So we've put in a 5 working day across the board now for hope that it will increase participation and time for reading committee papers.
Can I just say, as we had over 400 pages to read, that was a blessing.
Good.
Thank you very much indeed, because I know we will all have read the papers. We always do read the papers, but sometimes it's midnight hours trying to achieve that. So
and it was a constant feedback from members as part of the audit review that was one of the feedback constantly, that members didn't feel they had sufficient time in order to, on top of it, to be able to to really narrow down into the paperwork. So the 5 days was approved as a across the board option to assist that process. So hopefully that's useful feedback, Chair. So thank you.
Thank you.
We also increased a 5th scrutiny committee from the existing 4, and we split the enormous remit of the street scene scrutiny committee. So now there is a street scene and visual services and a culture, connection and place scrutiny committee to split that massive remit there. And we are hopeful that that will allow the scrutiny committees to really focus on their remits. We were finding that that particular scrutiny committee was just enormous in its remit, particularly in what it was looking at. The chair was finding it very difficult to manage. So hopefully with the positive feedback that we are receiving early doors, it will help some real tangible focused scrutiny on the things that matter by splitting that remit out a little bit, Chair.
And I just to note, myself and Mark, who was then the deputy chair, or vice chair rather, both of us were attending those discussion meetings, a forum, and it was incredibly helpful. So it was beneficial to us, and I think the rest of the committee benefited from our comments as well, because we brought a different perspective to the...
Yeah, that's true. I should have probably started with that, Chair. It was the chairs and vice chairs of Scrutiny Forum who led these recommendations and the review of the findings. So it wasn't officer led, it was led by the chairs, and as you said, so you were invited and gave some really valuable feedback then, which formed these recommendations, which council approved then back at the AGM. There's a creation of a framework document between cabinet officers and scrutiny to really solidify the different roles and responsibilities. So hopeful that that will help demark responsibilities and roles, which is seen as a positive step forward. And the only other thing to mention away from the scrutiny arena is we've introduced single cabinet member decision making. That is apparent in quite a lot of other authorities, which we didn't have here. That was agreed in the AGM as well, in an attempt to streamline the business going through the main cabinet. We were seeing cabinet agendas of up to 20, 30 items. Single cabinet member decision making is meant to streamline the business that goes to main cabinet. So single cabinet members are now responsible for taking run-of-the-mill, business as usual, day-to-day decisions, still open to the full scrutiny involvement should they wish on forward work programmes published, open to call in, but it is to streamline the business so that the cabinet are only focused on the more big hitting items and just to make the cogs of the industry move a little bit faster. We were not bogging cabinet down with all of these decisions. So single cabinet member decision has started since May. It is working well. The administrative process is starting to flow, and we've received positive feedback from the scrutiny chairs and the cabinet members and how that's really streamlining the business. So it's early days. We have started all of this from May, so administratively and for the people involved. But it was our responsibility, Chair, to bring the update back to you today for governance and audit. It is your responsibility to oversee the governance of the democratic arrangement. So excuse me, happy to take any questions, Chair.
I've got one point. I note on page 367, you've got the box, the first one is performance, governance and resources. Further up, higher up in the papers, that committee is actually referred to as performance, financial and resources.
Okay.
So
eagle-eyed there, Chair.
Right, I do pay attention.
No, that's great.
So I don't know, I can't remember which is the correct heading. I know Hugh likes the word finance in everything, but I sort of like governance too. So which is the
and it would have been in working documents probably. We had a similar issue with the renaming of the new scrutiny committee. I think it had a working name throughout some of it. So we'll just make sure that that's consistent throughout all the documents. Chair. So thank you for that. And we just double check that they're all matching. Some of them might have had their draft working names included in some of the documents.
Because I know the conversations, because the remits for these committees were still going to be large, and it was confusing as to what it actually was going to be. You knew what education stood for and safeguarding, but the others, visual services and street scene. It's interesting to see that's what you ended up with, basically. So,
yes. Yeah. Thank you, Chair.
There we are.
Yeah, it's performance and resources is the actual name that we've gone for, which that goes back to what it was called a long time ago. It's difficult to encapsulate a name to include everything. But
so we got rid of governance and we got rid of finance as well.
Yeah, so I take that feedback on board, Chair. Yeah.
Not happy.
Any comments, anybody? It'll be interesting to see how this unfolds. I suspect there may be a bit of resistance, not from us obviously, but elsewhere as things develop, I suppose. But any questions, anybody? No, in which case this is for information, and therefore we note the report. And the final item is actually agenda item 11, which is here as an urgent item. We were sent, and again, it was beneficial having extra reading time. We were sent this item at the end of last week, and it's going to be introduced by Louise, is it?
Audit Williams introduced it. Yes.
We hadn't been told they were being introducing it. Somebody needs to introduce urgent item 11.
So you retry us through the initial.
Check the Ross is.
There we are.
Yes, yeah.
Hello, diolch yn fawr. Yes, I think this item has been added last week. It's the reviews report, part of a national thematic review on commissioning arrangements that we've carried out in all councils. The focus of the review was to look at whether the councils put in place proper arrangements to secure value for money when commissioning services. And in terms of how we define commissioning in this respect, it's a process by which a council designs the services that it intends to deliver. It starts with defining the service and the desired outputs and the outcomes, and it ends then when the council organises that method of delivery. The scope of this audit in that respect, it didn't cover procurement or contract management arrangements, and it focused on that pre-procurement part, if you like, the commissioning considerations and the council's arrangements to ensure this is done well, is done consistently to ensure value for money. In terms of methods, we reviewed the council's corporate arrangement and we selected 3 services to test how these arrangements work in practice. The 3 services we looked at were a framework for sourcing agency workers from HR. We looked at the social services information management system that's been procured, and thirdly, we looked at the management of household waste and recycling centres. So quite a breadth there of different examples. We liaised with the council, with officers when we selected those examples, and we undertook fieldwork then between September and October last year. And the report reflects the arrangements that that the council had in place at the time. In terms of findings, then overall, we found that the council doesn't have clear arrangements in place to consistently secure value for money when it commissions services, but it is strengthening its approach. So in informing that overall conclusion, we looked at a number of elements. Firstly, we found that the council could demonstrate that a clear rationale for the services it commissions, but it doesn't always conduct a comprehensive appraisal of the different commissioning options available to it. So I'd remind the committee at this point that the scope of the review doesn't cover procurement, so this is not about tender exercises and comparing cost and quality against a set specification. It's more about the fundamental considerations that takes place in advance of procurement, so the options that the council considered and weighs up to ensure that what it eventually goes on to purchase is the right model for the council. Following on from this, we found that the council generally works with the right people and partners to design and deliver services, but it doesn't consistently consider the wider impacts that commissioned services could achieve. And that means that the council could potentially miss some opportunities to avoid duplication or to deliver some wider benefits. Another point to draw to the committee's attention related to the longer term planning around commissioning. So we found that the council plans over an appropriate timescales when commissioning services, which is positive, but it doesn't always consider how the value for money could be secured in the longer term, and it doesn't fully evaluate the effectiveness of its commissioning arrangements overall. The report contains 2 recommendations. So they include strengthening arrangements when commissioning services, including options appraisals and considering wider impacts. And secondly, around evaluating commissioned services, so including things like capturing some of the lessons learned and sharing that and embedding some lessons as well in terms of improving its approach. Council's completed a management response form, and that sets out how it intends to address the recommendations. Now, from our perspective, we are satisfied with the response. It demonstrates that the findings and the recommendations have been properly considered by the council. in terms of what the response itself sets out, I suggest, Chair, that officers are better placed to talk this through. So I'll hand over to colleagues to talk through the response through, Chair, if that would be helpful. But happy to take any questions as well. Thank you.
There we are. Thank you very much indeed. I do note, Nadine, that at the start of the papers, it's got agenda item 12 on it, whereas obviously on our papers.
Yeah, that's the agenda item, and then it goes into number 12. So
Yeah,
that's fine. Yeah.
There we are. Thank you. So officers.
Only to add to what I just already said, Chair, I think, as a council, we've taken on board the recommendations put forward and presented a detailed management or organisational response to those. Worth noting for assurance to the committee that we have taken steps already to improve, including the development of the new procurement strategy that was approved towards the end of 2024. And in response as well to the recommendations, we've introduced procurement strategy form and committed to officer training and annual cabinet reporting and enhanced contract review processes. So our aim here is to ensure these measures are embedded and that we have a culture of continuous improvement and accountability across all service areas, and taking on board the references made to ensuring value for money. Clearly, that is also something that we are embedding across the culture and how we approach these pieces of work as a local authority. But we are well advanced in terms of implementing those recommendations and the responses to them. Chair, I'm happy to take any questions. Chair.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions they want to raise? It's certainly a welcome development, and the recommendations certainly about value for money are incredibly important. So I like the report and I like the management response. Any questions, anybody? Or points rather? No? In which case, this document is for information and we note the report. How often are we likely to hear about this new initiatives, from a management response? Will this come back to us periodically?
I think what we've agreed, Chair, in the past with regards to all recommendations made by Audit Wales is that we would be looking to present kind of an ongoing review of how we are implementing all those recommendations across all reports from Audit Wales. It's a piece of work we've committed to undertake.
Yeah.
I think we've mentioned that to you before. It's also a piece of work we need to take at a corporate SLT, so strategic leadership team perspective as well. So we are on top of ensuring that when we have these recommendations from Audit Wales, we put in place the management organisation response form. It's important then that we follow through and ensure that we are on track to implement those. So there will be a new look report coming to you, hopefully in the not too distant future, with regards to how we are progressing the implementation of our responses to Audit Wales recommendations.
Once you're aware of the time frame, if you can add it to the forward report.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Unless there are any other points, that's the end of our meeting. So thank you very much indeed. For those of you who don't have to venture out, you'd be pleased to know it's boring at Talbot, and I have to be here